Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features Janis Falk and her latest publication, Not Yet Lost.
Janis Falk, in her first act, raised her family, pursued a business career, and lived large and wide. And now she has something to write about. She is a graduate of both University of Michigan and Northwestern University. Now, in her second act, she can often be found kayaking the Great Lakes or pruning lavender plants on her organic farm. Janice was born in Detroit, then took a multi year tour through Chicago. She and her husband Jim currently live in a home they built by combining two 157-year-old log cabins in Door County, Wisconsin. How cool is that?
Yeah, what are the odds of finding two cabins that are exactly 157-year old? Oh, anyway, let's take a look at the book, Not Yet Lost. In this gritty cinematic story, hardworking Florence and her best friend Basia are enraged by the poor working conditions in the factory where they hand roll cigars. Florence is as reserved and compliant as Basia is fiery and forthright. But in the face of this injustice, even she reaches her breaking point. During a time when choices were between bad and worse, this is an underdog story of a woman who must search for her voice in order to lead a labor movement against her husband's violent efforts to silence her. Will Florence and her husband resolve their conflicts both inside and outside the home? At what cost?
Wonderful. Janice, welcome to Midwest Writers Room. How are you doing today?
Great. I'm glad to be here, and thank you both so much for having me.
You
Yeah,
bet.
we're excited to have you and to chat a little bit about this book. So, with most of these chapter break episodes, we like to start right from the top and say, how did this story come about to you? What was the genesis?
Well, parts of the story had been in my brain for years. I wanted people to understand how Detroit had been in its heyday, particularly in the 1920s, how it had been a mechanical version of Silicon Valley, in the early 20th century. There was so much innovation going on there, and the culture and arts, follow that, of course, and it attracted immigrants from all over the world. So when the Depression hit, the fall for Detroit was much harder than it was elsewhere. Also, I wanted to showcase Eastern European immigrants. Poles and other Eastern Europeans aren't the ethnic groups that most Americans are most familiar with. So that was important to me. And then when I was researching the area of Detroit, Town, where my dad grew up, I read about the awful treatment of immigrant women who worked in the cigar factories. And that story is hidden in a dark corner and needed to be illuminated, in my opinion. And then to top it off, I discovered my husband's grandmother actually worked in one of these cigar factories. So it all came together, and I just had to write it.
Did you ever get a chance to talk to your husband's grandmother about this or not?
No, I did not. She was long gone before I met him. And I did find some notes from a cousin who had interviewed her. But back then, they just accepted that that was what life was like.
I love the fact that you described Detroit as the mechanical version of Silicon Valley. I've never heard it described that way before, and that really resonated actually.
Well, it is interesting. People in Detroit, there's such an engineering influence. My son's an engineer. My in-laws all work through the car industry, and it was a complete heyday of innovation.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the early 1900s, they were doing things to innovate on cars there that, nowhere else could be replicated. And a lot of that still carries through to today. But yeah, it's a little unfortunate that kind of what has happened to Detroit in the meantime, and just from the manufacturing standpoint, because it did lose a lot of what made it the car center of America and probably the world, really.
It
All right.
did. And
So we have to talk about publication because with every author, they've got their trials and tribulations, and it's a different path for a lot of people. So talk us through what your path was like.
well, it was arduous, of course, in today's publishing industry, but it was adventuresome and fun. Also, there were a few false starts with agents, where some agents were interested and then decided not. I got very fortunate with one agent who gave me some very, very specific feedback, which caused me to undertake some editing. I ended up choosing She Writes Press because of their credentials, their full service operation, and their distribution, which was most important to me since I don't live in Detroit or the Chicago area anymore. They distribute through Simon and Schuster. So I'd say, as far as struggles, keeping the story my own, that was very important to me. Everyone has a filter of what they think the story should be, depending on where they're coming from. But the creative control was very important to me. There's a lot more to the story in my mind, and it's more complex and nuanced than the typical strike story. So those were the struggles. I'd say, as far as the notable moments, the most notable to me and gratifying was when I received a review from Kirkus. The reviewer really got the story and understood what I was trying to accomplish with the complexity of the characters and the moral ambiguity they face.
Yeah, very interesting.
Nice.
So, a couple of follow up questions on that. How long did it take you to actually write the story, like from word one to you wrote the end? And then after that, what was the length of time for your actual publication from the time you started searching to you actually had a book in your hand?
Well, yes, that is a challenge. As far as actually writing it, I'd say 2 to 3 years. Fortunately, a lot of it's from experience. I didn't have to research a lot of the Polish customs and things like that. I live them, I know them. So that's pretty quick for this book, I think. But then it took me about a year before I actually signed a contract with She Writes Press, and it's been a year and a half since then until my publication date on September 9th. So, yeah,
Give
it's been a good 5 years.
Okay. And then when you're writing it, was that pretty much your sole focus writing that story, or were you kind of bouncing in and out of other writing efforts?
I bounced in and out of other writing efforts. I have for years with Red Oak Writing in their writing critique groups. So I would bounce in and out. And then I really only write during the winter because of the farm that we run up here. Summer's kind of off limits for writing, if you will, and I do end up spending more of my time pruning lavender. So it's kind of a 9 month a year endeavor.
That
Couple of
sounds
seasonal
divine.
jobs. Yeah.
Could be worse.
Yes.
Well, shall we move on to the reading?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Janice, when you're ready, Janice is going to read a little excerpt for our listeners of Not Yet Lost. And before you start, Janice, maybe just share a little bit about the context where you're reading from to give our listeners that.
Yes, we're about a quarter of the way into the book, and the women have decided to march through the neighborhood. And this is their second act of resistance. And you can imagine through the book, the acts of resistance become more and more intense. Come look at these signs. Helen, Wally's wife, led Florence and Basia through the crowd to the back hallway. Leaning against the wall, myriad signs, painted on flattened cardboard boxes and butcher paper, awaited their debut. Florence scanned the ragtag bunch of them. Bread, not crumbs. 8-hour days. When do we want it? Now, now, now. Colors bled into one another. Letters shrank in size toward the right edge of the paper. The signs, perhaps not eloquent in their delivery, told no lies. The brushstrokes oozed the conviction and fervor of their makers. The colors, mostly red and white, the colors of Poland. Flo, your painting skills from your convent days would have helped, Helen said, offering a wry smile. I won't deny the signs wouldn't pass muster in art school, but I think they're beautiful. Every one of them. Pride surged through her very being. Is it time? The women passed the signs down the line toward the front door. The group, now too large for the meeting hall, gathered in the street. The women organized themselves into rows, 8 to 10 abreast. Basha and Romek were in front, facing the crowd, along with Father Maletsky. An experienced union organizer agreed to help and occupied a position in front. Joan walked up and down the sidelines of the formation, handing out song sheets. Women who previously snubbed each other or had a petty quarrel exchanged smiles as they jabbed their makeshift signs high into the air, making them dance. Someone blew a whistle and they advanced. The planned route departed Don Polsky on East Forest Avenue, proceeded up Shane, past East Grand Boulevard to Joseph Campo, right to Mount Elliott, and right again to Warren Avenue, which would land them at Perry and Park. In the heart of Poletown, the park had served the community as a place of protest during the meat strike a few years prior. The press descended before they'd even reached East Grand Boulevard. Joan from the Polish newspaper provided the tip off. Today, Joan participated rather than chronicled. Reporters shot questions at the women on the ends of the rows, cameras shooting off every few steps. All the while, the women chanted, repeating their demands. Now and again, Joan led them in song. The women belted out verse after verse of Internationale, then other songs. The union organizer led the group across the trolley tracks. Trolley riders hung out the open double hung windows, and the women played for the captive audience. Chants grew louder, signs flew higher. For just a moment, time stood still for Florence. Her friends, neighbors, the priest, all together, silent no more. She started to cry. Anushka, her goddaughter, looped her hand through her arm and smiled. Florence laughed, cried, and sang all at the same time. Uncurling her shoulders, lifting her feet higher, arm in arm, she and Anushka proceeded over the tracks. Fear of reprisal slid down her straightened back, cast astern. They paraded past most of the cigar factories, including White Eagle and Mazer Cressman. Men, women, and children came out of their houses to watch. Many fell in step. Marching women beckoned them to join. Word spread like wildfire. Women took turns carrying the heavy wooden signs, giving their arms a rest. Sometimes a pair of women would carry a sign to share the load. As they marched past her house, Florence waved to her sons, Lucian and Frank, who'd climbed out their bedroom window onto the top of the porch overhang to watch. You be careful up there, Florence shouted. Distracted, she tripped on a rogue wooden block. The uneven street was paved with creosote-soaked white pine. Another verse had begun when Florence felt warm, heavy breath at her shoulder. Singing drowned out the clip-clops of the police horse approaching from behind. The uniformed officer, with practiced skill, directed his mount up the middle of the marchers. Chestnut brown withers looming at head height cleaved the crowd. She pushed into the others to avoid the boot nested in the metal stirrup. Looking behind her, she observed a dozen horses wending their way through the people, along with a lineup of police cars. In front, the leaders raised their knees higher, their voices louder. Alex allowed the living room drapery to slip back into place. Police horses had arrived. The scene looked too familiar. He donned his fedora and descended the front porch steps. Humbled for a moment by their sincerity, their fervor, and their devotion, he needed to protect them from their innocence. He knew the coda. He knew how this would end.
Boy, you really got us right in the thick of the the protest. That was so
I
well
hope.
done with the emotions of what she was feeling and how, finally doing something and feeling like you're in a community of people doing it. And nice.
And I have to commend you. You landed the term creosote soaked white pine. Look at that. I can't even get it right coming through on the second time, and you nailed it on the first take. That is impressive. And when I saw that phrase on there, I'm like, uh oh, let's hear how this one goes. So, way to go, Janice.
Thank you.
I love the fact that I remember years ago I read a novel that was set in, whatever the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in like 1911 or whatever. And it was, a fictional tale of a young girl who worked there with a family member. And throughout the book, you not only got a sense of the change that people wanted and needed, but also the local community. And it really reminds me of this a little bit about how you can tell just in this small snippet how into the Polish community you are, with the book, which is, you know, interesting
Yes.
and cool.
Yes, that's very true. It was
Yeah.
very tight community, much like today where immigrant communities band together because they're somewhat isolated.
Yeah, for sure. So tell our listeners where they can find your book and find more about you.
Well, Not Yet Lost is distributed by Simon and Schuster and is available wherever books are sold. On my website, which is janisfalk.com, and Janis is like Joplin, Janis, and last name Falk, Falk. There's buttons that will link you to bookshop.org, Barnes and Noble, and Amazon. And I've been canvassing the indie bookstores to inventory the book as well.
And we'll list that site down at the bottom of the show notes. So, any appearances or signings on your docket?
Yes, I do have a few things lined up. I'll be at Right on Door County August 30th, which is the Saturday of Labor Day weekend at 10:30 for a book launch. I'll be at Printers Row in Chicago the weekend of September 6th and 7th, which I'll be at the She Writes Press booth. I'll be at the book stall in Winnetka, Illinois on October 6th. And then I have a few other speaking engagements lined up in Michigan as well. And I would have liked to have been at the WWA conference this year. I've been in previous years, but that particular weekend, I couldn't pass up the opportunity to see Lech Walesa in person on his North American tour. It happens to be the same weekend, and I have tickets to go to that.
That's pretty amazing. How old is he now? Well, not that you would know off the top of your head, but
Well, no, I think he's around 82. I mean, he's
okay.
definitely early 80s. He's on this big North American tour. I forget how many cities, but yeah, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We'll
We can
allow it,
probably,
Janice. We'll allow it.
yes, we allow it. We couldn't get Lech as a guest speaker at the conference, so I guess it's fine that you go see him at his own thing. All
Thanks.
right. I want to take the time now to thank Janis for coming on to the show and introducing everybody to Not Yet Lost. Thanks to everybody out there who's hanging out in the Midwest Writers Room with us. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramir C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.